Welcome all, Dax here. With 2021 coming to a close, I wanted to reflect on the year that was in gaming. I've played more games this year than I had probably in the last 2 years combined. A sizable chunk of those games are old games I replayed or games I got around to for the very first time, or even a few late 2020 games at the beginning of this year. This list, however, will be focusing on new releases from 2021. I played a decent amount of the newest releases this year, but obviously haven't been able to play everything, so make sure you let me know in the comment section if there's any glaring omissions. Lastly, for this kind of video, I don't think a top 10 list would really work, so instead, I'd like to do a Game Award style where I'm going to be going over specific categories. So some of those categories are going to be best looking game, best story, most fun, and so on. Each of these games excel at different things, but I think they all deserve some attention. So sit back, relax, and let's get into it. The first category here isn't talked about too much, but is so common within the industry I felt it deserved its own award, and that would be the best port/remake. Are port, remasters, remakes, re-releases a way to snag a bunch of cash from nostalgic consumers for far less effort than an entirely new game but at full price? For sure, but sometimes a good remaster remake is all we ever really wanted. I chose to combine ports, remakes, and remasters into one category because it can get kinda gray at times. Not unique to this year, there were plenty to choose from. I recently had a ton of fun revisiting Sinnoh in the Diamond and Pearl remakes. Even with some glaring omissions aside, I know a ton of players love the Mass Effect trilogy, but I personally never got around to playing it. So for me, the best port/remake of 2021 was a bit of a surprise at the beginning of the year, and that was Super Mario 3D World plus Bowser's Fury. Most of the Wii U's library has been carried over at this point to the Switch through basic ports or sequels, but 3D World really delivered with its extra Bowser's Fury content. This extra content could have easily been its own game if it only lengthened, but instead is mixed in with a tweaked version of the original game, putting that together and we have a winner here. If you missed out on 3D World because you didn't own a Wii U, I would 100% recommend it, and if you already own it on a Wii U, then I'd still recommend it if you could get it on sale for the Bowser's Fury content. A little more negative here, we have the most disappointing game of the year. For this category, it is all about getting gamers hyped up for a release just for it to fall flat. This isn't necessarily the worst game of the year, because generally I actually try to avoid spending my time with bad games, but rather this is more of how big of a difference was there between the release of the final product versus what my initial expectations were. Last year I uncharacteristically pre-ordered Cyberpunk because I fell victim to drinking the Kool-Aid. I went on to hear all the bad news surrounding the game, so I decided to wait a month to play it, so I ended up actually playing it in January, with it being absolutely terrible, bugs aside. So since technically it came out last year though, Cyberpunk is not eligible. In a similar vein, the GTA trilogy really let me down, because I was going into it thinking, how bad could they screw this up? Joke's on me there, but my personal disappointment of the year was actually Biomutant. Biomutant was ambitious, and it does have its own charm in a way, but it fell short in almost every area for me. The world looked cool, but there wasn't really anything to do. Combat was a mixture of several mediocre systems, and the story just never really had me caring. It's sort of a shame considering how much potential some of the concepts had, and how much I wanted to like it. Hopefully this game can one day end up on a most improved list somewhere, similar to like a No Man's Sky, but until then it's gonna have to be here. Now on the flip side of the biggest disappointment of the year, we have the pleasant surprise of 2021. This would be one of the rare situations where reality was actually better than my personal expectations going in. 3D World plus Bowser's Fury could definitely have fit here, and I know a lot of players were pleasantly surprised by Guardians of the Galaxy, which I unfortunately missed out on. But my pleasant surprise of the year was easily Forza Horizon 5. I've never been big on racing games. I don't hate them, I just don't tend to care enough to put in any meaningful time into one. But for Forza Horizon 5 it's different here. The game celebrates cars as a whole instead of hyper-focusing on a specific aspect of racing. With a ton of varied modes, there's a little something here for everybody. You can even gain experience and progression just by driving around, not even racing. I found myself spending a ton of time customizing my rides to find the perfect balance and performance. A ton of options help too to really help people enjoy every aspect of driving. For me, I had a ton of fun once I turned on the manual mode, even though it was a little bit more difficult. Besides just being an amazing game, the other key factors to Forza's success is Game Pass. By having this on Game Pass, hesitant players like myself are way more willing to give it a try versus making a $60 or $70 commitment. Playing Forza Horizon 5 has somewhat converted me into a racing fan that will definitely be picking up the next game in the series. A small category but still important, we have the best multiplayer / party game. I wasn't sure if I should include this category, but the more I thought about it, I decided to keep it. A good multiplayer game or party game can really create friendships, even improve existing ones, and occasionally hurt them, but it's still super important. I really enjoyed the local multiplayer aspect of Mario Golf Super Rush. I missed out on It Takes Two, which I've heard nothing but good things about, and I couldn't quite put a shooter like Halo here. I'd have to consider the best multiplayer party game of the year to be WarioWare Get It Together. WarioWare is a very unique franchise known for its quirky series of themed microgames. Nothing is funnier than watching someone play for the very first time attempting to wrap their heads around the directions on screen, as well as the concept of the game overall. While the 4-player options leave something to be desired, the main series of microgames are a close to perfect 2-player experience that can be tossed around as well as being fun to watch. If you want to have a good time with a friend or a loved one, make sure you snag a copy of WarioWare Get It Together. The best score was an important category to recognize, but I had a hard time picking a winner with no immediate standouts in mind. I really enjoyed Pokemon Brilliant Diamond and Pearl's soundtrack, but it's hard to say how much of that was due to nostalgia. Another tricky one here is Halo Infinite due to its mix of old and new. I also really felt the emotions behind the soundtrack in Kena Bridge of Spirits. I've decided I'm actually going to go with Halo Infinite over Kena as a close second. Halo Infinite does an amazing job of marrying the interpretations of Marty O'Donnell's original work with some real well done new pieces that fit into the universe of Halo perfectly. An all-time classic that always inspires confidence before an inevitable conflict of epic proportions. What more is there to say? Like any of these other topics, stories and what makes a good one or even a bad one can be very subjective. For the best story of the year in 2021, there really wasn't a whole lot that stood out to me, at least compared to previous years in 2018 and even last year in 2020. That isn't to say they weren't good options, just not to the same level of prior years. Similar to the last category, I've personally narrowed it down to Halo Infinite and Kena Bridge of Spirits. Again, as mentioned earlier, I opted out of Guardians due to my low expectations after the Avengers, and I wasn't able to play Deathloop because I didn't own a PS5 at the time. Ultimately, I believe Kena Bridge of Spirits is my highlight of the year when it comes to good and impactful storytelling. Kena has a very simple but sweet narrative that was able to pull on my heartstrings more than most games. Being a spirit guide, much of the game centers around her helping those who have passed move on to the afterlife. I love the small but impactful cast of side characters that really help drive the plot and gameplay. Without getting too personal, I have lost several loved ones in the last couple years, and may be influenced by those emotions and experiences, but I believe anyone can connect to this story's themes of family, loss, guilt, and forgiveness. Definitely a beautiful game when it comes to both the story and the presentation that I would recommend to any PlayStation owner. That takes me to my next category, and that is 2021's best looking game, at least according to me. Being the first year of a new generation of consoles, we have seen some stellar looking titles for sure. Visual fidelity here is definitely a factor, but so is art direction. This is a little tricky due to having 4 different consoles within this last year with varying levels of power for my Nintendo Switch, my Xbox Series S, my base PS4, and my PS5. Games like Kena look good on PS4, which is where I played it, but they look way better on next-gen hardware. Forza looks good on everything, but flexes its muscles best on Series X and PC. The Switch has always been weaker when compared to PlayStation and Xbox, but Nintendo does tend to kill it with good art direction that renders graphical power somewhat irrelevant. This was a very competitive genre for me this year, with several games in contention that I haven't even rolled credits on, like Metroid Dread and Ratchet & Clank. The main games that I heavily considered were Metroid Dread, Forza Horizon 5, Microsoft Flight Simulator, Ratchet & Clank, and Kena Bridge of Spirits. Hard choice I bounced around on, but I kept coming back to one game more than all the others, and that would have to be Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart. I'm about 25% done with the main story due to only owning the game for about 2 weeks now, and a lot of that time was consumed by my Halo Infinite review. I was a little worried about possibly having some recency bias here, and was very close to giving it to Forza, but after replaying and rewatching all the games from this year, I am confident Ratchet & Clank is the best looking game to come out in 2021. Even watching footage at 720 or 1080, the game still stands out as a gem. I am liking the other aspects of the game like story, but obviously couldn't quite put it into story contention just because I haven't finished it. One of the few categories I could consider including a game I haven't completed, Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart looks like it could be a Pixar movie you'd go and see in theaters. The last category I have is arguably the most important aspect of a game, and that is gameplay, specifically the fun factor. What game was the most fun in 2021? Feel free to leave your thoughts and opinions down below for all the categories mentioned. I'd love to check out your thoughts. I had a lot of fun with several games, new and old this year, but I was able to narrow it down to 2 fairly quickly. Both Forza Horizon 5 and Halo Infinite were not only fun, but they were also addictive. When I wasn't playing, I was thinking about playing. Another thing these 2 games share in common is that they are both part of game genres I historically don't care that much about, and yet these 2 transcend my biases. For me, however, I would have to consider Halo Infinite to be the game I had the most fun playing in 2021. I played a few hours in multiplayer, but was more than content just exploring around Zeta Halo while stumbling into bases and conflicts. This title captures the basic 3 elements to a fun Halo game: great weapon selection, balanced and varied enemies, as well as fun vehicles. The grapple shot alone was a blast in all situations, combat and traversal. In all honesty, there were a ton of fun games this year, from Forza to WarioWare, or even revisiting games like Ghost of Tsushima with the Iki Island expansion. But for my game of the year, as far as fun factor goes, it's definitely Halo Infinite. So those are the best games of 2021, at least according to me. I thought about making a top 10 list, but felt that many of these titles shined in a different way worth going over. I don't personally have one particular title as my overall game of the year, but as you can see, there were several reoccurring games in Halo Infinite, Forza Horizon 5, and Kena Bridge of Spirits. But another great year of gaming in the books. I should have a 2022 most anticipated list coming out here within the next couple days, so keep a lookout for that. If you enjoyed my video, make sure you leave a like or even consider subscribing. I want to thank you all for watching, and until next time, see ya!